Hi there. Thanks for joining today. We're going to be chatting with Shannon Harris of Fuse Living, headquartered in Phoenix, Arizona. Shannon basically handles the entire process for clients from beginning to end for development and design phases for new construction, spec, custom homes, or remodels. And so she's a great resource for people who are looking at adding instant equity into your homes. Maybe you're looking at acquiring a property, but the kitchen needs a little bit of love, or maybe you're scraping a home and rebuilding your primary dream home. So I want to chat with her about what she's seeing trend-wise. She is an advocate of healthy home living, which is basically sustainable living from the systems to all the materials. And so we'll get to know her and talk about the process. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out, and hope everyone's doing well. All right. Well, thank you, Shannon, for joining this morning. I know this has been kind of top of mind, kind of occurred to me. And I know this is kind of the platform of why we're meeting today is, there's so many properties out there right now that need some love. And they're big projects to take on, and whether you're scraping it and rebuilding or you're actually doing, just a remodel, you need to have the right team behind you to take those projects on, but they are more approachable than what people think. And it's a good way to build instant equity in your property. And, whether you're using it as an investment property or maybe it's going to be your primary, you kind of take, I guess, two different approaches or multiple different approaches to what the property type is, how much, budget wise you want to spend, and what you're overall doing with it. So thought it'd be good to meet with you because obviously you handle the whole development side of things and will be a good resource for clients that are looking to take on these projects, really guiding them through the process from beginning to end. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Do you want to just kind of do a little intro about yourself and kind of your background?
Sure. Yeah, I'll just take a minute here. So I'm Shannon Harris of Fuse Living. We started the firm as a new construction development firm, and with a kind of healthy home mindset in mind. So this was also started in Denver, Colorado. We built ground up. We acquired the land. When I say we, that's my company, Fuse Living. We acquired the land. Worked with a team of professionals to come up with a vision. I specifically would obviously work on the interiors of each building and property that we developed, but we would have architects involved, general contractors involved, and then we always built these as for sale product in the end. And so a true developer hat, and that means to me, like really part of the whole process. So acquiring, financing, the design process, and then the exit strategy at the end. And since then, I've grown the firm into an interiors branch as well. So here in Phoenix, Arizona, I have Fuse Living Interiors, which is a firm where we take on residential clients, as well as B2B clients like investors for, flipping investment properties and things like that. And so, yeah, I mean, in the last 10 years, it's been a decade since I've owned Fuse Living and started Fuse Living. And in the last 10 years that we've been anywhere and everywhere in the home and design and real estate industry from the construction standpoint.
And you have a couple projects going on right now?
I do. Yeah. So we have, from a client perspective, a couple of projects that just started their construction phase. So we went through design last year. And then the contractors, we just got into framing on one project. We just demoed another project. And those are two, ground up new constructions, and then a couple of substantial remodels as well. And then from a development perspective, I'm doing a prototype building with a collective group of people from, again, that kind of healthy home mindset, which I won't get too much into because that can be a whole rabbit hole.
Yeah, maybe just do a little summary of what that is.
I mean, everybody, I think at this point knows the word sustainability, and there's really kind of two tiers of sustainability. There's like the earth friendly side and the energy efficiency, water efficiency, things like that. But then there's also like the material content and like the human health standpoint and kind of psychology behind our spaces and our living environments, as well as like what are our materials made up of, and making sure that they don't have toxic output or off gassing and all those kind of scarier topics.
Gotcha. So it's basically in the materials that you're using. So sustainability and making sure it's not necessarily net zero homes, but just making sure that what's being selected is healthy for living in the home and the environment.
Right. And that's what I've based my interiors firm off of. And then the prototype is really like all of that in one, package. So considering like the whole human and the environment and like sustainability and, all the kind of woo-woo topics like EMF waves and
Yep.
different things. Yeah.
Gotcha. Very cool. Well, do you want to kind of dive into the process of, from beginning to end? I know there's a couple different approaches and we've kind of discussed a little bit offline, but why don't we kind of just dive into the whole gamut?
Yeah, for sure. And I know your audience and your network is kind of made up of clients who might be interested in building new or remodeling, as well as investor clients as well. So I want to touch on both of those aspects. It's when I was thinking about it earlier this week, it's all the same parts and pieces go into a home at the end of the day. And when you're talking about an investment home versus a residential client home, from a design standpoint, it's basically just you're looking at like a 2,000 piece puzzle versus a 4,000 piece puzzle. So the process is very similar. You're still going to go through all your phases of design at the forefront because you need to know what you're building. And I say that, which sounds obvious, but I've had a couple of cases where clients are like, well, we're kind of, from a financial standpoint, we're at the end, we've almost, paid all of our fees, but nothing's happening yet. I'm like, well, yes, that's, my part comes first. So that way we can get you to where the construction part comes second. But it's all the same processes. You're going to make sure you secure your financing in whatever way that you figured out works for you. You're going to go through the entire design process. You're going to align your team members, which would be architects, engineers. Architects usually have like a good base of their kind of periphery design contacts, your interiors professional that you're going to hire, and hiring your general contractor. And you really want your general to be involved, in those kind of final stages of design to make sure that what's being designed is affordable for your budget. And if any tweaks need to be made, that can be implemented into plan sets, drawing sets. It's really important because generals really do build off of plan sets, and it needs to be the right information that they're building off to just avoid any hiccups in field.
And materials too.
And materials, yeah.
Big part of it is because your budget, when you're going into it, if you don't know of materials cost X amount, or let's say how long it takes to get them,
right? Yeah.
Right. You have to kind of all be communicating about that stuff and be on the same team about it.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the thing. It's, if you have your full design ahead of time, which can be hard to do and can be hard for a lot of people to visualize, but you really need to get ahead of that schedule and that ordering schedule and that material schedule. So that way you don't have delays in your construction and from a cost perspective and a, just availability perspective. Mm-hmm. So going into it, your first kind of team members that you need on board are absolutely your design team members. And then a lot of times they will have general contractor recommendations or vice versa, whoever you might want to find first. But those team members are where you're going to want to start. And you'll always go through a discovery period to understand the intentions of the project.
And what the client wants and needs. And then, you do the design options too, and kind of get through that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Very cool. So with different pieces, so remodel, it's basically kind of the same way. And you guys handle the permitting process and all that sort of thing too with the city that you're working in. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, the general contractor would. In Phoenix, actually, you can submit permits as an owner.
Gotcha.
And then as you go through your build, it's just like as built owner inspections. Mm-hmm. But also you can also have your general pull the permits as well. And so it really just depends on how your general works and if you want to be more hands-on or if you want to be more hands-off. Some owners have been submitting for permits because it has been a little bit quicker lately. Yeah, not very much though. Yeah.
If owners submit, and also maybe you maybe the costs for doing that is a little bit versus your general doing it, mm-hmm. Be a little more just easier palette.
Right.
Yeah. Very cool. And so of the different cities, I guess you could say Scottsdale, Phoenix, everyone else surrounding, is there a certain city that's easier or quicker or has a more lengthy process?
Getting through permits, Scottsdale is actually typically easier than Phoenix, which is surprising. And other than that, it doesn't really, they're so close in proximity, like from a pricing perspective or who works where perspective, it doesn't it doesn't really matter too much. But yeah, Scottsdale has been easier in the last couple of years.
Gotcha. Yeah, there was a project that we were going to do actual casita on our house last year, and it was taking just forever to get a permit with Phoenix. We kind of dropped it at the moment, but I guess they were really, really backlogged for a moment there.
Yeah, they implemented a new system. And so I think they just had some delays in getting everybody on board the new system.
Got it. That must have been what it was.
Yeah.
That's
Insider info.
yeah, that's fun.
Yeah.
What are your favorite projects to work on?
I love the new construction projects, or I mean, because a lot of times remodels they'll be phased, but if it's a substantial remodel and somebody has, the wherewithal to kind of withstand like a longer project all at once, I love those just because we can get into so much more with the design from many different aspects, like a very holistic aspect, where we are considering like what are your daily functions overall in a home, and kind of get into that psychology piece, and how you're carried through. And it's just harder to do that if remodels are more piecemeal.
Yeah.
And then it's, you're getting into things like, okay, well, we did this room and now the floor got discontinued, or, like it's just harder to piecemeal remodels over time. So I do love getting to space plan. I'm going to reference a puzzle again, because it is really just like a big, puzzle piecing different rooms and spaces together. I love getting to know my clients. I'm such a people person. If I was going to go back to school for anything, it'd be social anthropology. Just like how people work and operate is so fascinating to me. So when you have more like holistic projects, you really get to dive into that. And yeah, that's probably what I love most.
Yeah, starting with a blank slate or a blank canvas, really, then you're able to kind of dive deeper into it, and it's more of a complete project versus having to do remodels that can be very singular, right?
So exactly. Yeah. And I think just like considering the whole thing as one big process, and then there's different milestones, it's like, it's more palatable actually if you do it that way, because you're looking at the full picture right away. Whereas if your phases, you're re-energizing that mind space you were in 6 months ago for that room. And now, but like when you're starting the whole project at once, you're able to follow the different phases of the overall project, the different phases of design from that kind of whole mindset. And it just carries through much simpler and smoother.
So I know with, you have, the remodel process, and then also the new construction from the time of, let's say, acquiring a property. And you're doing, let's say, a rehab remodel, you guys could come in right away after closing and then go ahead and like start. Do you normally, I guess, could you start a design phase prior to a client closing, so that basically on the day that you close, it's ready to go?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that could even be part of your due diligence period. And that's whether it's for a residential, like a client based, or for a property, a spec home situation. I would say, especially in a spec home situation, I've had architects out on site, through a due diligence period, contractors out on site through a due diligence period. But I think that's when you want to really bring people in, is through that period, and make sure that your vision and what you have in mind is able to come to fruition on that piece of property. Yeah.
Do you find yourself, and I know when I was talking to Sherry, it was more so, it's really hard in this environment for purchasing property, just because, the homes are going quick, or, semi-quick, to actually fully do all your feasibility, get your design, everything ready to submit to the bank as a part of like construction loan. So she tends to see things more happen on the back end. So you close, and then you have your kind of period in which you're doing all that. What do you see as the trend?
Yeah, I would say you make sure that your project is feasible, from a buildability standpoint during your due diligence period, like while you're in escrow, but you're not going to have your design, you're not going to have your overall construction cost until, depending on what the project really is, a couple months or a few months later, to then submit to the bank and finalize that.
Yep. And then basically at that point, once you get those finalized, that's when you have your construction loan, and then that kind of kicks in.
Typically, I would say you go through your design, and while you submit for permits, and during that kind of waiting period of permitting is when you would, really engage your bank and get your financing solidified as well. that's how we did it with all of our development projects. So that way it wasn't just, you're just kind of killing two birds with one kind of time stone.
Yeah. So basically you get the property in your name, and then you hustle to do all your due diligence, all your pieces, permitting and final, your final product basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. So are there, when you're taking on new clients, are there kind of do's and don'ts or any tips or tricks that you could kind of share, looking through the lens of the spec, new construction, and then also remodel?
A remodel is always going to be more tailored, obviously, to the client. And so it is really two different lenses that you're looking through. Do's and don'ts for a spec home or an investment property, that's where the real estate team, talking about different teams, like the real estate team really matters. Like it's kind of your job to pull comps and like help guide that investor and that buyer as well. And so that's where that relationship is really sound and solid. I mean, even for me, when I look at land to do a development, I really rely on the real estate team that I'm engaged with as well, because that information is like gold, right? Mm-hmm. And then even just like touring other properties in the area and really understanding, and that could come from you, that could come from my own research, but understanding like what that little niche market is asking for. I'm not a fan, I would say a don't is I'm not a fan of building something that's completely uncharacteristic of a neighborhood. I think that's just not wise. I don't know that you want to be that standout person in that way. So if you have like a certain aesthetic you're after, like seek out a property or a location where that makes sense. Otherwise, yeah, if you're in love with an area, really be mindful of that area and what the curb appeal looks like, and don't be the oddball.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice too. And also, I mean, that hurts your resale value. A lot of people want to maximize their square footage and maximize and also put their personal flair into it. But if it doesn't match the neighborhood that you're in, because you're the nicest house on the block, or maybe again, your aesthetics of the house doesn't match what's around you, it actually hits your resale value or your value in general. So I think that's really good advice.
Yeah. And then you just said something that sparked a thought, like, speaking of maximizing square footage, it's not all about square footage. And that's, I think, a trend that we're seeing in our industry, and in this more, mindful kind of healthy home conversation, is being more thoughtful about design versus just like building square footage because you're going to sell off square footage. Like the value doesn't have to be the number of square feet. The value is, okay, what are the functions? What are the intricacies? Like, how can this home really support the life of its occupants, not just the volume of space?
Yep. The smart use of space versus, like you said, volume.
Yeah.
Less is more.
Sometimes.
And then speaking of trends, I guess, what are you seeing? I mean, there was a huge wave of just gray flip crap that's been out there for a long time. And I know that's not even you could tell the finishes that have been used are not sustainable. They're very much run of the mill and kind of temporary, not timeless whatsoever. But what trends are you seeing now, I guess, entering the market, or maybe your clients are asking for that maybe weren't asking for before?
Yeah. So a couple of things specifically on like particular aesthetic trends, and then also just the general trend of the flippers are not doing as well. The spec homes that are of, I don't know, dare I say a luxury class, like those are still doing really well, even in a market that, had a little bit of a struggle for a little bit. And those areas in Phoenix, the Arcadia areas, the Biltmore, the Prentice, like all the spec homes that are really thoughtful are still selling, and still everybody loves them. So to take an investment approach of, oh, we're just going to flip this and we're going to, kind of just like hodgepodge things together, like that's not going to work anymore, because it's been around for long enough. This type of investment, rehabbing a home, it's no longer a rehab. It's how can we create something beautiful and functional that people appreciate?
That's timeless.
It's timeless, correct.
That's the important thing when you have something, because you start to get, I think, from looking at a property, that was remodeled or was built, let's say 10, 15 years ago, that's kind of the point where it shifts and you need to start updating finishes and, appliances and all that sort of thing. But naturality, at home that's really built well and timeless, you can go 30, 20 to 30 years. have really solid, your cabinetry is real wood and you have your, all the materials that you'd use to do something like that, but real stone and like, all that sort of thing.
Yeah. And that's what I was going to get into with like the aesthetic trends right now are so much more timeless than they have been in any recent history. Like a lot of natural materials, a lot of like even almost old world, like walking through European cobblestone streets kind of feeling, but a little bit elevated, not quite as rustic, right? So like that brings in that timelessness and like flagstone on a wall, just like really amplifying texture and natural materials in a very elegant and timeless sort of way.
Yep.
What
are you seeing any color trends that people are gravitating towards right now?
I still see a lot of neutral, which is, I mean, we're a colorful firm, so we like to put color in tile and in furniture and like everywhere. Of course, not everywhere, but yeah, there's still quite a bit of neutral. I will say it's warming up, like it's warmed up from the gray for a couple of years now, which is great. But yeah, the pops of color and really like sensory. So a lot of sensory trends, like multiple senses getting enticed through walking through a home.
So when you say sensory, that's more so like texture and like light use.
Texture, lighting, a lot of key lighting areas, like mood lighting is, and it's really impactful. Like that's really impactful to the human body and so like an overall experience in a space too.
I agree.
Yeah.
I'm huge on lighting. And it's like so funny how lighting is just, it is a simple thing, but it's also extremely complex. I think from the designer side, just, imagining a space and then making sure, right light reflections and where things need to go. It is very, very, they're specialists for that.
Yeah.
Right. So, but it is super, super important.
Yeah. And those are the things that's fun about, even a substantial remodel, but for sure buying land in a new construction property is you can orient your building to play with the sun and, like work with the sun and just really involve lighting in like the natural ways as well as supporting with the, obviously just electrical lighting.
Are you seeing much like the smart home tech still being kind of implemented or asked for?
Yeah. Implemented, yes. Asked for, not a ton. Not a ton.
So meaning that you just kind of know what people, the modern day, homeowners.
Yeah, I think it's a sellable feature in like a spec home. And it's really nice to have. I haven't had a lot of my luxury clients like come out asking for that.
And I think smart home tech means a little bit different to everyone. So in your eye, what does that mean?
From my perspective?
Yeah, like what are the features that you think that are in smart home tech?
Like whole home controls, that's your garage door opening and closing with a camera on it so a package can come inside, if you're not home, or your lights being automated to create different moods in different rooms, your shades, the smart appliances. That's actually becoming a interesting trend, is the smart appliances. Being able to start and stop things, if you're not there, smart in your washing machines and things like that. So yeah.
Yeah, that's good. And then any of systems. So I know HVAC systems and, is there anything in that realm that you guys are using or seeing?
ERVs, which have been around a little while, but I think a lot of people still don't totally know what they are, but energy recovery ventilators. And so that's where, as we're starting to build the envelopes of our walls, so all the exterior walls of a house more tightly constructed, so that way there's not air leakage. You need these energy recovery ventilators to bring fresh air in. Air changes in a home are super important and key to like the health of a home. You need to make sure you have as much fresh air coming in as you have bad air going out. So that's system stuff. I am seeing actually in Phoenix, I was part of a project that they just approved a gray water system, which is amazing. And so that's just on a recirculating line, taking the gray water, reusing that for, other uses within the home. And it has a filtration system on it as well. What else? Yeah, I think those are cassette type HVAC systems that aren't like as big and bulky, but more just like a conduit line where it's an exchange in the unit. And so you don't need like massive amounts of ductwork.
Yeah. I mean, that's a big one, right? Because you have the months in which your AC is just going and going. So
Yeah.
that's, and especially with, just energy in general and, all that you definitely, that's to me, one of the number one systems in a home that probably gets used and abused so much.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and there's maintenance plans for that. Like I have one HVAC contractor and you can sign up for like a yearly maintenance plan, which people honestly don't even think about. Like people really don't think about the maintenance or the ongoing love and care that these systems need. So my brain goes to a lot of places, but it's interesting to see sub trades start to kind of like, really honor their systems and say, hey, like we're going to make this easier for you. And yes, it's like a subscription plan, but it's for a purpose of, really maintaining all the systems that need to be maintained.
I did that. I did our water quality and I also did our 2 HVAC systems on Monday of this week before I left town, just because just need to know where we at with things. Because as it starts to get, warmer and you start kicking on that AC, you want to make sure that it's actually going to be working and you're not all of a sudden it goes, out and you're replacing the whole system. At least you can kind of get ahead of it.
Yeah. And that's what's cool about like smart home and automation stuff. Like we're seeing a lot of that get looped in as well. If you like solar and just kind of like those systems information. So that way you can be ahead of it instead of exactly what you just said.
Yeah. So talking about like budgets and everything. So let's say someone buys a home and they want to remodel a kitchen and like maybe 2 bathrooms and what have you. And they could say, okay, well, we have this amount of money to make this work. And then you could can you help them with that? Based on kind of what your budget is?
Yeah. And we always ask for budgets, like what do you have in mind? What have you been approved for? What do you have in mind? Like, just let us know what's in your head, because then we know where to go to help you. Right. And it's like anything, everything is variable, right? Like depending on the finishes, the light, there's so many variables. And that's where it's like the 2,000 piece puzzle versus the 4,000. And so really identifying like back to that discovery period, what people truly care about, what they would splurge on, what they'd be more economical on, and what their true cares and interests are. We help put all those pieces into that budgetary puzzle. And I consider that my job to do that.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to kind of put you on the spot just a little bit. So just an average, and I know because I know it ranges, but for a new construction spec, what's the average price per square foot for a building?
Probably about $200 a square foot.
Okay. And that would be
like true or more luxury finishes, maybe up to like $250 a square foot.
Okay. And then how about like remodel? Is that, do you have a number that you could place like on a kitchen, bathroom, that type of thing?
It would be similar around that, maybe like 175, 200 range. It's harder to say square footage on just like a one room,
Yeah. Totally.
And then kitchens again are so variable, because who knows if you're buying like Electrolux and Sub-Zero and Wolf or, whatnot. So
I think that provides a good baseline, though. So
yeah.
You did good there. Sorry. I always hate when I get put on the spot with numbers. I'm like,
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. I mean, I think just to kind of reiterate the process, because I know your intention was to just start talking about the topic of taking on projects like this. And it is a process. Like, we're not going to say it's not a process, and we're not going to say it's not a big undertaking. It is. But it's just alignment of who you bring on to help you with that, and making sure that you're in the right mindset. Everybody works a little bit differently. Knowing how your contractor works is going to matter, because every contractor structures their fees differently and things like that. So it's just really, I think first and foremost, tuning in with your intention, whether it's an investment property or your own personal home that you're going after. And then just aligning yourself with the team members who are experts in the field to make this happen for you.
Yeah. And also considering your timeline too. And so do you manage the general contractors? You guys handle that whole scope, or what? Does that normally work?
In a developer mindset or on a spec property, yes, we do have like management of the overall project schedule. General contractors will always manage their own trades and manage their own schedules. It's just communicating, if I'm an interior designer working on a home with a contractor, for a client, the contractor is going to drive the schedule.
Yep.
And
Gotcha.
I'm just going to work within like my budgets and my materials orders and things like that with the contractor.
Yeah. Are you, I know in the Seattle market, general contractors, even though the home services industry is kind of loosening up a little bit, but it would, they were fairly backed up for a long while. I'm not able to touch projects for, months and months and months.
Yeah.
How would you find that that's maybe different in, Phoenix, Scottsdale, Paradise Valley area?
Well, I think we were similar. I think COVID was wild for us. It became this biggest, hottest season, which I don't think anybody expected. So I think we were probably similar. I am seeing it loosen a little bit. For example, like I mentioned, now I'm in construction phase, which is a lighter phase for me because design is my big phase. So going into construction on these couple properties early this year obviously lightens my schedule for design projects coming in. But yeah, I think there's a loosening, but it's still like the pipeline's still there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then as far as like interviewing, because the general contract part is a huge piece of this, because that's how you get the final product, right? Are you available to kind of help guide clients through just in terms of like the red flags or things that they should look for, or good, healthy relationships, and kind of set clients up on a good foot there?
Yeah, I do. I have a list of questions to ask your GC that I send out to any new clients that don't have a contractor in mind yet.
Yeah, that is the tricky part, but I do find that actually in Phoenix and Scottsdale, Paradise Valley, there are more contractors, I think, that general GCs that are good at what they do, versus probably up here in Seattle's market's a lot smaller. Yeah, it just really feels like you guys have a lot more people just in general in the trades industry than here. And kind of interesting to witness, which makes it feel more approachable, hence why we're having this conversation, because it's quite different, the mentality of it all. So you just also went through kind of a rebranding because you moved out of your studio and you're kind of focusing more so kind of on these other projects. Your new hashtag is casually high style.
Casually high style.
Yeah. You want to talk about kind of what that means to you?
Yeah, sure. People would be like, well, what's your personal style? What's your brand style? And I just kind of distilled it down eventually to this casually high style. It's like I believe in a little bit of jazziness, a little bit of elegance and flair and flavor, but in also very much into like organic and raw materials. So the casually high style really is like, think of your Chicago penthouse or your Seattle penthouse and bring it down like just a notch. So it's more everyday living, approachable, and kind of like comfort living in that, from an organic standpoint, in that penthouse.
Very cool. I like that a lot. It's very approachable, but yet I like the sustainability. I like the being mindful of the materials, how people are living in their spaces and all the different spaces too. So it looks great. You did a good job.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask you one more kind of weird random question. Have you ever had a nightmare development or nightmare just kind of in the process that you can share a little bit about?
This picture we're looking at. See it? Yeah, it's funny. It just timelines got a little blown out of the water. I can share, it was a big project for the contractor, and this is where alignment of your team is so important, that they had the knowledge and the skill set. It just was a little large. And so, it just took extra time to get ducks in a row and things like that. Change orders became a thing that were unexpected. And so it was a lot of navigating how to really tackle this project and get it back on track. When a couple of things always happen, right? And it's just about like how quickly and how efficiently and how smartly, if that's a word, can you recover from the things that happen? And that's where the true alignment of your team really matters. So,
or you see them coming down the pipeline and like, this is not going to be good.
Yeah. And it was like, there was one point where I'm like, we should just press pause, regain, control and and the pause just never happened. And it was like, the pause would have been very helpful, in the end. So
sure.
This was the learning one. It's beautiful. It's elegant. It's in Cherry Creek in Denver, Colorado. It's 2 buildings, 12 condo units. It's an amazing project at the end, but yeah, it was painful. It's my residency project. We'll call it that.
Okay.
Residency.
Sure. You learn so much from those different experiences too. So It's like a growing pain. I always think
Sure.
and they just kind of set you up for being better in the future.
Exactly.
Yeah. Good. Well, thank you so much for your time. And was there anything else you wanted to kind of touch on at all?
No, I mean, nothing about the conversation really. I appreciate this opportunity, and I truly because growing pains and things, I love being a resource for you as an agent, for clients. I have no end goal. I love sharing my experience, and being a resource and being helpful is a daunting process. But again, if you're aligned, it's so much better. So
having a good team definitely matters at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
We'll really appreciate it. We'll post this video and also your contact information, and continue to kind of send people your way, and wish you got the best as you kind of transition into your new phase, next chapter.
Thank you very much.
All right. We'll see you later.
Okay. Bye.